Hi, I'm Rod Bryant. Welcome to another class. Today we're going to be talking about selecting a rabbi. Just wanted to remind you that if you have not availed yourself of the opportunity to join in the Sunday evening discussion and class at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, then we really plead with you to come and be a part of this growing group of students. Currently, we have over 200 students enrolled in the program, and we are very excited about what is happening. On your journey, many of you have attempted to try to find a rabbi and to know where to look. We are going to give you some generic outlines on who you should be looking for, but we also want you to understand that every rabbi is different, just like every human being is different, and you actually have to find a rabbi that somehow your soul connects to and that you can learn from. In the previous lessons, we examined the laws governing what Torah may be learned by non-Jews and what Torah may be taught to non-Jews by Jews. And in this final lesson on Torah study, we're going to look at rabbis and the different types of rabbis and the requirement to show proper honor to Torah scholars and Torah books. Let's talk about the classical rabbinical ordination. This is called a shmika. And it says in this verse, "And Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, who may go out before them, and who may come in before them, and who may lead them out, and who may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord not as sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said to Moshe, Take Joshua son of Nun, and a man in whom is spirit, and lay your hands upon him, and set before him Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him in charge in their sight. And you shall put your honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may hear. And that he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire of him by the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. And at his word shall they go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before the entire congregation. And he laid hands upon him, and he gave him a charge, as the Lord spoke by the hand of Moshe. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him, and the children of Israel hearkened unto him, and did as the Lord commanded Moses. And God said to Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. And I will come down and speak with you there. I will take of the spirit which is upon you, and will put upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you should not have to bear it alone." This long verse that we just recited came from Numbers 27:15 through 23. The laying on of hands and placing the Spirit described in the above verses are the first examples of rabbinic ordination and the beginning of the classical shmika. Now, just as a side note, just remember, when I say shmika, it stands for Hebrew for ordination. Joshua went on to ordain others, who in turn taught and ordained their students down through the generations. This ordination was not a license to teach Torah or to lead a congregation. It was the transferring of divinely sanctioned authority from one scholar to another. This ordination, imbued with the holder with the spirit of wisdom, imparted holiness to his words and thoughts. Shmika was required for certain roles. It was especially needed in order to serve the Sanhedrin and other institutions of Torah law. Upon entry of the Jewish people into Israel, certain rules took effect governing how this ordination was given. Shmika could only be conveyed by a quorum of 3 judges, a beis din, one of whom must himself have a shmika. Shmika could be conferred verbally or in a written matter. The laying on of hands was only practiced in early ordination, was not practiced beyond the generation of Moses and Joshua. Both the grantor and the recipient must be in Israel at the time of the shmika is given. And in order to receive the shmika, one must be an expert in all areas of Torah law. One must also be a proper character and zealous observant of the mitzvot and the words of the sages. An important detail of rabbinic ordination is what is tiered. Ordination was not in specific areas of Torah knowledge to receive any one of these ordinations. However, a scholar must be capable and fluent in all areas of Torah knowledge. The ordinations were in ascending degree. Looking at Deuteronomy 34:9, here are some examples. Numbers 11, 16 through 17. Most of the material that will be taken from this course and for this discussion is from Maimonides, Sanhedrin 4 and then 13b through 14a. Helico Sanhedrin 4, 5 and Sanhedrin 5a. Let's first examine the term yoreh. He shall instruct, he shall instruct. This ordination was for matters of religious and ritual law. Then there was a yadin, he shall judge, he shall judge. This ordination qualified the scholar to matters of civil, criminal, and monetary law. Then there is yatir, and it is he shall permit, he shall permit. This ordination qualified its holder to rule on matters of animal sacrifice and ritual purity. This chain of ordination passed unbroken for centuries until shortly after the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 123 to 135 CE. In the wake of Bar Kokhba's failed attempt to reestablish Jewish autonomy, the Romans viewed shmika as a dangerous expression of Jewish desire for self-rule. And they also realized that by ending shmika, they could destroy the Sanhedrin. What would ensure that what ensued was a brutal program of persecution and suppression. By imperial decree, giving shmika was a capital crime, a capital offense with terrible consequences. Not only were the parties to the shmika executed, but the absolute destruction was decreed upon the city in which the shmika was granted. To emphasize this point, the emperor also ordered the complete destruction of all villages and settlements located within 200 amos of the city boundaries. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the Romans had driven most of the rabbinical community across the border into what is now modern-day Iraq. With a few sages actually remaining in Israel, the chain of shmika eventually broke. For the next several centuries, the title rabbi would not be used. Instead, a scholar would either be referred to as a kohen, a wise one, or if he held a position of authority as a gaon or eminence, rabbinic ordination, modern shmika. In modern times, shmika refers to a degree or a diploma certifying one as having completed the course of study with halakha, Jewish law. The impetus for the new shmika was the rise of the medieval university, which began to use diplomas and degrees. Jewish communities in constant flux saw the value of credentialing its religious scholars. They called this academic degree shmika. In Sanhedrin 14a, there are some Gaonic traditions indicating that ordination may be continued beyond the 4th century. However, even these concur that there is no modern shmika. The term rabbi is not all that common in the Talmudic era. There are many honorific uses in the Talmud for Torah scholars. However, most of them are referred to as simply by their name or their nickname. While this shmika caught on in the European Jewish world Sephardic communities didn't adopt it until very late. And what do I mean about this shmika? Was one that get a certificate of education on a particular rabbinic subject or Torah subject, and that would be your shmika. Now, today, a shmika is given at 3 levels. The equivalent of a bachelor's degree, it's called the Rav Umanid. The shmika ordination in the 20th century at Ner Israel Rabbinical College in Baltimore, Maryland, and it certified the holder as a teacher and as knowing the basic laws of the synagogue rule, services, ordination of holidays, etc. Not all yeshivas issued this shmika or accept it as valid, were accepted, and the holder may use the title of rabbi. The Yoreh is equivalent to a master's degree based on the classical Yoreh. This is usually awarded following a course of study in kashrut, dietary laws, Shabbat, Nidah, that is law pertaining to women's ritual purity, and Avelis, mourning. Traditionally, the final exam is given with an issue of Veheter, a very detailed subsection of dietary law. And this is the most common shmika that we have today. A rabbi with this shmika who holds the position of communal authority may be called a Rav. Now let's look at the term Yadin. Also based on this classical shmika, this ordination is the equivalent of a PhD. It requires extensive study of the laws of monetary and civil damage, as well as laws of marriage and divorce. One who holds this ordination may be called a Rav or Dayan. In the U.S., however, they are usually called Rabbi or Rav. There is a 4th level that is very uncommon in our times called Heter Hara, although this term is confusingly applied to other ordinations as well, or Shmika Moreh Hara. This is an all-encompassing shmika awarded to rare scholars who have mastered the entire body of Torah literature. Now, very few people receive this today, and the problems with modern shmika students of Judaism and Noahidism should be aware that there are many details and problems with the modern shmika. I am not setting myself out as the expert on shmika. I just want you to know. I am merely reflecting the teachings of the sages and the evaluation of the rabbi that wrote this course material. A shmika is first and foremost a certification in Torah law. Biblical interpretation, philosophy, and theology are rarely, if ever, part of the curriculum. Shmika is only relevant to the study of Torah law. It is not rewarded for knowledge of other areas such as science, mathematics, etc. Shmika is an academic degree attained after a course of study and examination. It is not awarded based on righteousness or character. And there are people with a shmika who are not particularly pleasant people. One who has a shmika at one level may not teach or answer questions about the law from a higher level. Obviously, if you've had any particular extended dealings with a rabbi and his teaching, there are sometimes questions could arise in a class that the rabbi is uncomfortable with answering. And it may not be because he does not know, but it's because it's outside of his, what we would call wheelhouse, his framework of training, and therefore he defers to another rabbi. It's important to understand that. Someone with the Torah shmika should not answer questions about Yadin, for example. In the past 15 to 20 years, many yeshivas have begun awarding shmikas in very specific areas of study. For example, someone may take a course in the laws of Shabbos and receive shmika in Shabbos. This may even be done online, for example. However, he may not know any other areas of Torah law. Such a person must be very cautious about holding himself out as a rabbi because he's not qualified to discuss anything other than the laws of Shabbos. There are many areas specific, and rabbis in today's world, unfortunately, may hold themselves out as Torah authorities when in actuality they are woefully unqualified outside of their narrow area of study. It doesn't mean that they don't hold a special status or that they have a proper grip of their own knowledge. It just means it's not within their wheelhouse, their framework of teaching and knowledge. Of rabbis who teach or rule on matters in which they are not thoroughly versed, Maimonides described them as evil, arrogant people. Because it is possible to get a shmika in only one narrow area, it means that one doesn't have to be a Torah scholar anymore to be a rabbi. Likewise, one doesn't need to be a rabbi to be a Torah scholar. One does not have to study at a yeshiva to attain a shmika. Either a person can study at a yeshiva and receive shmika from the yeshiva, or he can study privately and be examined by a renowned Torah scholar. Ultimately, the world of the Torah scholarship is a mediocrity. The greater scholars receive the greatest recognition and are according to the authority of the merits of their achievements. For this reason, many of the greatest Torah scholars and authorities over the past 150 years never bothered with a shmika, never chose to be given a shmika. Choosing a rabbi, the only qualified rabbis, are those who are observant and receive their training from Orthodox institutions. If someone has or was ordained by a Reform rabbi and subsequently became an Orthodox, their ordination remains invalid. Known from where a rabbi received the shmika, did he get it online or from a recognized Torah scholar or a yeshiva? All three could be valid depending on Halachos Talmud Torah 530. On the level or on the subject of the source, also, what did the rabbi have to study to receive a shmika? Was it one area, or did he have to complete a long course of study? Most importantly, is the rabbi affiliated with a particular institution, or he is a lone wolf, a lone rabbi? Rabbis who do their own thing and could generally be avoided because they have no accountability to anyone other than themselves. You must endeavor to find a rabbi whose scholarship you have confidence and who you believe will take your interest seriously. If you always agree with everything your rabbi tells you, then your relationship with the rabbi is not a healthy one for you. You want to find a rabbi who challenges you. Most importantly of all, you must find a rabbi who is consistent in his teachings. A rabbi who changes his opinion to suit the audience at hand or when he is challenged would be someone to be avoided. One of the most interesting things that could be stated at this time is in your journey to find a rabbi, knowing that every man that is a rabbi can have different personalities, different temperaments. You have to find one that you can, as we said earlier, receive from. One that you can take his teaching in, one whose lectures and teaching does challenge you. At the same time, we understand that rabbis, there's nothing wrong with you having an expectation of your rabbi to have integrity and good character. If the rabbi that you have is consumed with evil speech and negativity, it's someone you shouldn't be around. If the rabbi that you teach have no knowledge of Noahidas, it's probably important for you to find a rabbi who does. Now let's move on and talk about a general license called Kabbalah. This sounds familiar, obviously. Besides ordination, there is actually another rabbinic crediting called Kabbalah. Although it's very similar to the Hebrew word for mysticism, it is an entirely different meaning here. A Kabbalah is a license to practice as a mohel, perform circumcision, or actually an actual shochet, or for ritual slaughter. Mohel is a unlicensed mohel should not be used, for example. Additionally, unlicensed mohalim are exposed to tremendous liability. Besides the religious requirement for licensure, many countries have laws that enforce an actual certification. A sofer, there is a tremendous number of unlicensed soferim, or scribes today, and many of these are producing non-kosher mezuzos and tefillin. Without licensure, their work should remain unacceptable because the work of an unlicensed or scribe considered non-kosher, even if the unlicensed is a Torah scholar, if their work is executed properly. Purchase of safros from an unlicensed person is likewise prohibited. What do we mean? You can have a perfect Torah scroll or mezuzah that you purchased, absolute perfection, but if the man is not particularly licensed, it's not a kosher mezuzah. And obviously today, if you were to go try to purchase a kosher mezuzah, they're not cheap. And especially if you want to get someone with the highest level of recognition. Let's talk about a shochet. What is a shochet? A ritual slaughter of animals. The requirement of licensure for a shochetim is very, very stringent. The meat of an unlicensed shochet is treated as non-kosher even if he slaughtered the animal correctly. As a result, the meat is either discarded or sold to non-kosher meat companies. Let's talk about another very important subject in this matter, giving honor due to Torah scholars. There's a concept that we've practiced in our community, and many Jewish communities do the same, and that is to rise before an elderly person and stand before a wise man. This teaches that as we are obligated to show honor to a Torah scholar, or by standing in his presence, we must stand when a scholar enters or leaves the room, if he is within 6 feet of us. For an exceptional scholar, we stand when he enters the room, even from more than 6 feet away. The idea of giving honor due to the Torah books. There is an actual law that talks about giving honor to the Torah books that you have within your library, such as this. There are a number of rules that ensure the respectful treatment of holy books. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or the Code of Jewish Law, 28:4-10, summarizes these. 28:4 says, one should treat sacred books of even those other than a Torah scroll with great respect. If placed on a bench, it is forbidden to sit on this bench unless the texts are placed on some object which is higher than that, at least a hand's breadth. It is surely forbidden to place such a text on the ground. You wouldn't lay a Torah book on the ground, a chumash, anything with the sacred name of God in it or the divine language. A person should not put a sacred text on his lap and rest his arms upon it. For example, I've seen people have chumash and then put their hands on it and lean on it while it's in their lap. It's inappropriate and it's not supposed to be done. When necessary, one may sit on a chest that contains other sacred books. However, this is forbidden if it contains a Torah scroll. Mashim, written books of the 5 books of Moses, may be placed on the books of the prophets and sacred writings. The books of the sacred writings may be placed on books of the prophets, and books of the prophets may be placed on the books of the sacred writings. However, we may not place books of the prophets or of the sacred writings on the Chumashim. The idea is like if you have a text of the sacred writings and you have a Torah scroll, you couldn't prop up or place on top of them the books of the prophets, etc. Let's look at 28:5. A Torah scroll that has become worn would be placed in Geniza. The same applies to other sacred texts and writings and ritual articles. It is forbidden to burn them. Now, one would ask, I have a Torah book or a book that has sacred name of God in it in the Jewish or Hebrew language. What do I do with the book? Well, it's more appropriate for you to go to a Jewish community and ask them if they have a Geniza and can you place those books in them? And often they will do that with no problem at all. As a matter of fact, recently our community Nativ in Houston, Texas, had to do that very thing with beautiful sacred text. And it's almost like having a death in your community, because you hate to see this beautiful book have to be put down because it's no longer kosher. Let's look at the next text. One should not toss a sacred text or even works of law or agadah. Similarly, it is forbidden to turn them upside down. If one finds one upside down, one should turn it the right way up. If you lay a Torah book down, you cannot lay it in its opposite way, upside down. Or if you're sitting there, you shouldn't put other books that are not Torah books on top of it. Here's another one that is interesting. One shall not urinate in the presence of the holy text. In an emergency, one should be at least very careful where they place the book, and it has to be within 10 handbreadths above. But I would recommend that if one has to go to do bodily functions, they do not have it in the room with them at all. One should not make covers or mantles for a sacred writing from an article that was used for ordinary purposes. However, ex post facto, it is permitted, however, if it is made up from articles that was used for idol worship. Even after the fact, it is still forbidden. Leviticus 19:23 is the scriptural reference for that. It is forbidden to use a holy text for one's own benefit, to stand it up for shade in the sun or as a screen that his colleagues does not see what he is doing. However, if the sun is shining too brightly on the text, that one is studied. One may use another text for shade because he is not using it for one's own benefit. Similarly, to place the sacred text under another text from which one is studying to raise and to make studying easier, it is allowed. However, one should not place one's text inside another that one will not need to be searched afterward in the place one was learning. One should not rule a notebook on top of a sacred text, since a notebook is not sacred until one has written in it. Similarly, one should not place paper and the like within sacred text to be preserved, i.e. sticky notes in a Torah scroll. Completely forbidden. One who destroys sacred texts transgresses a negative commandment. Do not do to the Lord your God. We need to rebuke the binders of books who often glue in the covers of the books and pages from sacred text. Also, great care should be taken when given old holy text to a Gentile binder to rebind. One should remove the old cover and hide them, but the binder does not use them for secular books. As an overview, there are a couple of things to remember. First of all, we need a rabbi. It's important for you to try to find one. One of the best ways that I recommend finding a rabbi is to go into the local community and see if you can find an Orthodox rabbi. If there is one available, approach him. Let him know that you are a Ben or Bat Noah. You've been studying Noahide laws from qualified Noahide teachers on the internet and would like to have the ability to come in during certain times of study opportunity to consult with the rabbi about particular text, etc., and see if he opens his arms up to you. Some will, some won't. Do not take it personal if they don't. Some are uncomfortable because it's just not their sphere of influence and they're just not comfortable doing it. Wipe the dust off your feet and continue on trying to find one. The internet is full of very good qualified rabbis who have put themselves out to study with Noahides. Nativ in particular and Yeshiva Perchei Shoshanim have some amazing rabbis that have stepped up to the plate to do weekly teachings and do Q&A sessions. We have some wonderful rabbis that do that each week. If you have not become part of the Nativ outreach and program for weekly learning, you have to join us as soon as possible. It's on from Sunday, 2 times on Sunday, once on Tuesday, once on Wednesday, once on Thursday. Incredible classes, and you don't want to miss the opportunity to study in a good environment with a good rabbi. Next, learn to honor not only the rabbi, but also to honor your Torah books that you have in your home. Make sure that you don't mix the books of Torah with certain secular books that would be deemed not proper to be put in the same bookshelf with them. Make sure that all of your books stay the Shem wholly separate from other material. Don't put a newspaper or a magazine on top of your Torah book. When you're studying, avoid leaning on it or using it as a prop. Or when you're writing your notes, don't write your notes on top of your Torah book. Have your notepad to the side when you write. And remember that notebook that you write in, if you have the sacred name of God or other sacred text written on it, then it should be treated in the same manner that your Chumash should be treated with, or a Torah scroll should be treated with. It shouldn't be just thrown in the garbage can. Now, it's really important. It's about living a life of honor and respect. Honor and respect to our rabbis and Torah scholars. Honor and respect to the books that we have. And remember, your journey for searching for a rabbi is going to be made complete one day. Don't stop. Keep looking, and may Hashem give you strength and cause you to go from strength to strength as you find your rabbi.